that I'm blessed. It's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a...
For those of you that don't know Art Vasquez, he's been in the real estate game for almost 2 decades, right? 3 decades. Oh, geez.
Yeah,
okay.
30, going on 34 years.
34 years in the business.
Isn't that crazy?
It's a lot of time in the business, man, but it just goes to show that that they always say that to really become an expert in anything, you have to have about 10 years into it, right? So you've got 3 decades into it, which means you've mastered many facets of the business.
Or that, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, you've been through
A few
multiple
times.
cycles. Yeah. But in all sincerity, I mean, we don't know each other that well, but I was super, super impressed. I met Art because I was invited to do a presentation with another agent here in Denver. And honestly, I had no idea you were even going to be there. I showed up. I had just gotten back from vacation, and we had a chance to meet briefly. But watching Art's presentation, I was just like, holy cow, man. Like, everybody needs to see this.
Right.
Because I think so many agents and so many consumers get hung up on what is not really that important. And I just think that presentation you did, man, was just, you kind of dumbed it down in a way that anybody could understand. And it was using their own information, like we were using their numbers. It wasn't like you were sort of guiding them for the math to make sense.
Isn't it interesting? When I wasn't expecting that class either, so I wrote that 3-pillar presentation when the interest rates had gone up, because so many people were focused on interest rates. And we do know that most consumers they only care about I've taught agents this over and over again, that consumers only care about the price of the house to the extent that they believe it's fair. What they're really buying is a monthly payment, and you know that as a lender too, right?
Yeah.
If they're buying that monthly payment and they know that that's something that they feel comfortable with, they're going to move forward. Well, you had these interest rates, which, by the way, just to give some background on it, the last time we peaked at 8.5 when these last rates went up. Do you remember that? And so what happened is that if you look at 2008 is when the rates, 7, when we had that big massive blow up in the real estate market, right? And the interest rates were at 8.5 in 2008. So it took 13 years for them to get to their all-time low, which was partly subsidized by the Federal Reserve in their actions. And so then from that point in 2001, the lowest, to 2002 when they started to raise the rates, in 13 months, they took back all of the reductions that it took 13 years to go to. So of course there's going to be sticker shock. So we do that presentation that you saw for the first time, and a lot of people are wowed by it. And the thing about it is that it's not selling who I am. It's not like Art Vasquez is this great, unbelievable investor, or my 34 years of experience. None of that is important when doing this presentation. What's important about it is that it quantifies in front of the buyer the benefits of owning versus renting over a period of time. I mean, what were your takeaways from it when you saw it?
Well, I loved how you compared what somebody's gonna, because oftentimes I don't think about, or most people don't think about the money that they're actually throwing away when they rent. Like, I think there's a general understanding that, like, hey, I'm not building equity, I don't own the property, but I don't think people really look at really how much money they're giving somebody else over a 10-year period of time. And I loved what you said, by the way, which was you're buying a house no matter what. It's just who, or how did you say it?
Okay, so and you got to be careful when you say that. So when I teach the agents this statement I'm about to say, I'm like, look, don't say it from your perspective. Say that my mentor says this all the time, and so that if it rubs somebody wrong, they're not going to blame you because you're quoting. And by the way, just for anybody that's watching, quoting is the best way to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble, and you can say anything you want. It's sort of like being from the South. In the South, they'll teach you that if you say bless your heart at the beginning or the end of the sentence, you can say anything you want. Like, I'm like, hey, Derek here, sometimes, man, that guy can be overbearing, bless his heart.
Bless his heart. Dude, that's so funny, man. Like, growing up as a kid, my uncle would always say that.
Yeah.
And now looking back, I'm like, I always had this sort of general appreciation for my uncle without really knowing why.
Oh, yeah.
And then I heard an agent who, ironically, I'm closing a transaction with on Friday. I was talking to him, and he always would say, bless his heart. I'm like, I don't like this guy so much.
Well, and it's so sweet, right? Like, you hear it over and over, and you're like, you know what? You're always late. Bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Tell me.
Right.
Open up.
Yeah.
So back to the quote. So one of the things that when we do is, as you were saying, is that we evaluate rent for the last 10 years, right? That's one of the pillars. We call it the 3-pillar presentation, although when the realtors are teaching it, or even lenders like yourself, we call it a 3-pillar analysis, because that's what it is. And we ask the person who is sitting there, what rent are you paying currently? And if we're doing a group class, we take an average based on an average meat and potatoes area, then we let everybody throw their number in, and then we go with the lowest number or a lower number to be really conservative. Then we evaluate it over 10 years with rent increases at 5% each year, and it's shocking because at the end of 10 years, I think we used $2,500 as the rent in that example or close to it. And when you look at it over a 10-year period, you've paid your landlord over $340,000 in that 10-year period. And I think that initial shock, when people see that, they're like, wow, I didn't realize it was so big. Then we get to the other part of the presentation, that the other 2 pillars of the presentation. And then after we've done both of those, then I bring this quote up after we're talking. I'm like, oh, by the way, you may not know this, all of you that are sitting here today, but you, regardless of what you do when you walk out the door, know one thing: you are going to buy a house today. Now, the thing is, you're either going to buy it for yourself or for your landlord. But either way, you're buying a house.
And that, I think just really hits home with people, right? Because they're like, shit, I never thought of it that way. But even, you asked me what one of the takeaways was. One of the other takeaways was that it almost didn't matter what you used for rent. I mean, a lot of people in the room were like, $2,500. There's you can't get anything in Denver for $20, right? It's $3,000, and people were sort of debating what should be used as fair rent. You went super conservative with it, but even if you took that number down to $1,500 a month, the comparison and the statement that you were making through that visual was still there, which is it's almost like you would be an idiot not to buy.
It's stunning, right? And look, as salespeople, what is our job? Is our job to really convince people to do something? You got to think about it. Owning a house is part of the American dream. And I do another class called The Power of +1, where I'm teaching people that the old American dream doesn't work like it used to. You used to be able to buy a home, pay it off, retire. The average Social Security check, you know what it is in the U.S. today?
$1,300.
It's like $1,700.
$1,700.
Yeah. Well, it's actually different for different parts of the United States, but even the highest, I think, in Colorado is $2,200, in a very luxury resort area. And so when you look at what the American dream is now, it's not, one property isn't enough. It's like, well, what if I owned one property and I did nothing more my entire life about one additional property, right? What would my life look like? And I'll go through that scenario a little bit later if we have some time. So back to the presentation, we talk about that 10 years of rent. And what's interesting is that we do use a conservative number. And, sometimes we have people say, well, we moved in with our parents to save some money. And sometimes the brokers get stuck on that. They're like, well, what can I use for rent? So it's a real simple answer. You just ask them, if you were renting in this area that you want to live in, what would you be paying for rent for the kind of house you want? Oh, that's easy. We'd be paying $2,400 a month. All right, do you want to use that number? Yeah, we'll use that number. And so when you look at the mortgage payment, which is part of this analysis, it's really much higher than the rent is for that first part, and that's where the sticker shock is. Everybody's like, oh wait, I'm going to go from $2,500 a month or $2,400, whatever number we choose, to $3,600 a month. That's a big jump. And what we want to do is help them understand what that really means over a period of time, right? And so that's why we look at, principal reduction too, because some of that is going to pay off the loan. Well, let's address that. So people have never done that, right? And so, when I teach the realtors and even lenders, I have a lender that he goes, if my realtors don't do this, I do it on every single presentation now. I do this 3-pillar, and it really only takes about 22 minutes to do. And because it's interactive, you have your client using the calculator running the numbers. Now, for the personalities that love that, they love the details, great. For those that aren't really about the numbers, they still remember that they did the work. They may not remember how they got to those numbers. They just remember they did it and it made sense at the time.
Yeah, they're positive that the math makes sense, because I went through it myself. Right. Yeah.
And so then, and one of the things that I've seen doing this presentation over and over again, and now I have brokers that are doing their own classes and inviting 10 or 15 people to come. And look, I'll say this, it's not a pat on my back, it's just that it's such a powerful way to present the numbers to people, and it's so much different, right? Because what do agents normally do when they do a buyer's presentation?
Yeah, they talk about themselves.
They say, this is why you want to work with me. This is who I am. This is my years of experience. This is what's important when you're looking to buy. Then they go over the process of buying, and they go through all these details, and every realtor does that, right? Every real estate broker does that. So now this presentation, you're not even talking about yourself. You're like, hey, I'm glad you're here. We're going to get right into it. We're going to start talking about the benefits of home ownership versus renting. The goal here is that when you leave, you have enough information to decide if it's the right time for you to purchase or maybe wait. And I'm good with whatever the answer is. And that's what I was saying sales is. Sales isn't convincing somebody what to do, Derek. It's just giving them a different way of looking at the same thing and making sure they have the information so they can make an informed decision.
Yeah, it's just educating them, right?
Educating them.
Yeah.
Had you ever seen anything similar to that 3-pillar presentation before?
I really hadn't, and the other thing I took away was that, because you're right, a lot of agents tend to talk about their production or how long they've been at the business, and I think that when you have the ability to show somebody what's in it for them and a more holistic vantage point and a longer term vantage point, that's when it just sort of becomes a no-brainer. And any agent lender can use this presentation and have better results. And to me, really what I'm hearing is like you're really a mission-driven messenger, right? Like you've got a mission to be able to share a perspective that most people don't see. You're just the one that's communicating.
That's exactly right. And when you think about it, look, people ask me, oh, Art, do you have a spreadsheet? Can you send me a spreadsheet version of this? It would take 3 minutes to write a spreadsheet to do all the math for you. And I warn them. I say, look, if you print it out and you do all the work and you hand it to somebody and then you review it with them, it has an effect, but not nearly the same effect when they are handwriting it down. They're doing the 3 columns. They write each number down. One person writes, the other person's doing the math. It has a totally different feel. For a couple of reasons. The psychology behind it is that when they're participating, time goes by like that for you and them. The other thing that happens is you're creating a deep rapport. And you don't even realize it, because what happens is you step in as a coach now. You're more consulting / coaching them, and when you become that, that's actually the highest level you can go when you're in sales, is when people look at you not as a salesperson only, they see you as a coach. Because what happens when you coach people, right? I used to coach them when I did my Power Plus One. So I do the class, right? And then and this is when I was wholesaling. So from 2008 to 16, my partner John Dilly and I were wholesalers. We were buying properties at the auctions and we were selling them to investors who were flipping them. Well, there was, I don't know if you remember, but in 2011, there was a tax credit that came for buyers. And it pushed a lot of buyers to buy. Well, as soon as the tax credit was gone, the next couple of years, you had all these buyers come out of the woodwork, but now you had a lull in demand for buying. So then I start teaching this class so people can look at investing properties, right? And so I did this Power Plus One class, and the whole idea was to get them to look at owning rentals long term, right? And so when we taught that class, I taught that to a number of different people, and they would come up to me and they were like, great. And I would teach them the formulas. So that was the other part, how to evaluate properties properly. And I teach realtors to do the same thing. I'm like, look, empower your clients to make these, to evaluate on their own. They still need you to find the product. So you're not creating a monster. What you're doing is you're actually creating a thinker. And that's what we want. We want our clients to be thinkers. And so,
but they're still being tied back to you.
They're being tied back.
Because as a coach, they're like, well, hey, Art, what do you think about this?
This is exactly what I was getting to. That's very, very good. That's exactly right. So what would happen is I was teaching it to agents and I was teaching it to consumers. And so they'd come up to me and they're like, okay, what do we do next, Art? And I'm like, well, have you looked at these list of properties that we have? And they're like, no. Well, then go look at them. All right, they go look at them. Hey, we've looked at these properties. What do we do now? Well, have you run the formulas on these 10 properties? No, run the formulas. Okay, we'll go do that. You run the formula, call me back on the phone. Hey, Art, we run the formulas. What do we do next? I'm like, well, which ones are the best? Pick the top 3. And they're like, okay, here are the top 3, and they give me the addresses. What do we do next? I go, well, you drove by them? Yeah, we drove by them, we looked at them, good. All right, so then what's next, coach? And I'm like, well, which one makes the most sense of the 3? And they're like, A, B, C. Let's say they say B. B does. Okay, what do you think you should do? I think we should probably write an offer on it. I said, you're exactly right. and see, this is that kind of, when you get to that point, it's not even selling, right? It's just, see how enjoyable that is?
Yeah.
That whole conversation where like, what do we do next? But they have to trust in you and have confidence in you. And when you educate people, you create a tremendous amount of trust and confidence when you educate. And that's why it's so important for realtors to put on this education act, and lenders for that matter, and teach them this thing that nobody's ever taught them. Their parents hadn't. They didn't learn it in school. No one teaches family math in school anymore, so they can learn these things. So that is, I think, one of the big parts of it. And then them writing it down. There's something about when you physically write something down while you're thinking about it, while you're going through the exercise of the math, that just helps you remember, if not the numbers exactly, that's what the sheet's for, at least the experience, right?
Yeah,
because it's a wow experience.
You're getting all of their senses involved, which makes it more real for them.
Right.
I want to go back a little bit, like before you got into wholesaling, like where did you grow up?
I'm from Denver.
You're from Denver?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Denver in Curtis Park neighborhood / 5 Points, which is now called Rhino.
Okay, yeah.
Denver North.
Yeah.
And I was always, I went to Denver Public Schools. Then I went to CU Boulder.
Okay.
So I'm a CU buff.
What'd you study?
Economics.
Okay.
And, I have 4 daughters.
So you're one of the few.
Yeah.
One of the few that's actually using your degree.
Well, you know what? The thing about it is that when you think about, an arts and science, major, you're looking at that economics, it was a good focus, right? At the end of the day, what really happens at the university, right? All it does is teach you how to get through different classes, because they all have a different way of teaching you and then seeing if you have the knowledge, right? And it's really just seeing if you can adapt to the different classes. I took a drama class there and there was a written test. I was like, they figure out a way to get you on all those, take a written test on everything. So, after that, CU, then I got my real estate license. I actually opened a little go-kart racetrack and then got my real estate license. I was going to make all this money and I was going to buy tons of rentals.
Were you racing or something? What made you want to do that?
How about being broke? So
just trying to figure out a way to make money.
One summer, my friend took me to this go-kart place and they were charging $5 for, 3 minutes or 2 minutes to race around this go-kart track with 8 other people. And what I noticed is there weren't a lot of people there, but the line was continuous. So there was always 5 or 6 people waiting for the next race, and then those people would get out and they'd get on, and then when they left, another group came in, and I raced one time, and then I sat there and just counted and did all the math, and I was like, wait, they're racing for 5 minutes, they're charging $5, they have 10 cars going, that's $50. There's 20 sets, well, let's see here, there's 10 sets of 5 minutes and 60. And so I'm doing all the, figuring it all out, and I'm like, then, transfer time. So let's just call it, 9. So I'm like, 9 times 10 people is 90 times $5 for a race. And I was like, that's pretty good hourly. And then I did it. I went and did it. And
That's awesome. And then what was the impetus of getting into real estate?
because my grandmother she was an entrepreneur and she owned real estate.
Okay.
And I would take her when I was 16. I got my license. I would take her to go pick up her rents. And in my Power Plus One class, I teach one of the parts on how to manage properties, and I didn't realize how much I learned being around her and her management style.
Was that her business, real estate?
No, it was one of her main businesses. She had a grocery store, and she did a lot of different things. And at the end, it was her main business is real estate. Yeah, she built a mini fortune.
That's incredible. So you kind of grew up with a family that was entrepreneurial.
Correct.
And so you didn't really realize that you were learning all these lessons at the time. You were just sort of doing it because you were
no idea
brought along for the ride, or maybe told to do it, or maybe she paid you a little bit of money to do it or something. But
it's not until you start experiencing it on your own and you go back, you're like, wait, that's why she did that. And it's just, you have these ahas. And
so big takeaways from her?
There's huge stories. I'll give you one that was an example that I talk about in there, is that I drove her to pick up this rent, and she knocked on the door, and the lady answered. And by the way, a lot of these tenants that my grandmother rented to were Spanish speaking. She knocked on the door, and the lady was there, and she's like, I'm here to pick up the rent. And the lady's like, oh, my husband just left. He has the rent. If you can come back in 3 or 4 hours, I'll have the rent for you. And she's like, oh, okay, that sounds good. She goes, can I come in and talk to you for a second? And the lady's like, okay. And she invited my grandmother in, but she's really nervous about it. And my grandmother started talking to her and asking her, how are things going? How do you like the house? They had paid their first month rent. So this was up front. So this is the first rent that they were paying.
Okay.
And they didn't come to my grandmother to pay it, so she went to them. Okay. And then...
Was that common? Where she would go to them, or was this?
No, it wasn't common. They usually come to her, but if they didn't pay when they were supposed to, then she'd make a trip. So anyway, she walks into the little foyer area, and then they're talking. And she goes, you know what? I think I'm just gonna wait. And the lady's like, what do you mean wait? She goes, I'm just gonna wait for your husband to come back. And she went and sat on the couch. Didn't even ask. Just went and sat on the couch. Said, I'll just wait. And I'm like, Grandma, and I went and sat next to her, and then, I'm like, Grandma, this guy's not here. He's not gonna be here for 3 hours. What are we doing? I'll just bring you back. She's like, no, we're gonna wait. So the lady sits on the couch. They're sort of facing each other, and the lady's sitting like this, just, all stiff, and just having this really uncomfortable small talk with my grandmother.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, there's something on the television. They're speaking Spanish, and I don't really speak Spanish. Well, I didn't speak Spanish at all then. I barely speak it now. I'm like, I need to learn Spanish so I can be illiterate in 2 languages. So I sat there, and then literally I was just so frustrated with my grandmother. I couldn't understand what we're doing there. And it's weird. 30 minutes into it, we hear the back door squeak open. I'm like, please let that be him. Let him be home early. And then all of a sudden I heard the door slowly close, and nothing. And nobody walked through this kitchen door to where we were sitting in this living room / dining area. And I'm like, wonder what happened. Then all of a sudden, there were leaves on the ground. I heard crunch, crunch, crunch from the back to the front. And guess who walked through the front of the door? The husband. And he's like, I'm back. And I'm like, wait, this guy just walked out the back door and walked all the way around. He was here the whole time.
Oh.
And he came in and he's like, oh, hi, to my grandmother. And he says, I have half the rent. And my grandmother, she was tough. I mean, she was barely 5 foot, but her presence was she's like a giant. So she starts telling him, you don't have the rent, it's late, you made me come down here, and then you lied to me and told me that he wasn't here. And they were apologizing profusely. So she took the rent. She told him, you better have the rest of that rent, and because they had wasted her time. She went home. Later that day, they brought the rent. They were never late again, ever. They always brought it. They even brought it early, going after that. So then when I teach that in the class, I'm like, well, what are the takeaways? What are the takeaways here? And a lot of people are like, well, you got to show up to their house, I guess is what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But what does that mean when you show up to their house? And people would throw ideas out. It shows that you know that rent is really important and that you care about receiving the rent. So you're sending a message that this is important. Well, her sitting in the room in the house was showing them at the very beginning that if you invest a few hours at the beginning to show them how important it is to pay on time, then what you're going to figure out is that the tenant understands and they don't want to go through that experience again. So my grandmother knew by investing a few hours, which it didn't even end up being more than an hour, turned out to be like 45 minutes total, because she's, we're talking to him for a little bit after he walked through that front door. If you invest time at the beginning, then the rest of the year you'll save time because you won't have to be chasing these people down. And that was a big takeaway.
Yeah, that's, what else did you learn about confronting conflict? Because I would imagine in your business and owning a lot of real estate and rental property, which I know you have, what are the common themes where you're dealing with conflict?
Well, I'm glad let me put it in the context of a real estate broker and their client. Okay, and as a lender, you fit into the same category dealing with clients. What I have learned over the years is that clients will get offended by little things that weren't done, that you either knew didn't get done or you didn't realize, and they weren't satisfied with your explanation of why they didn't get done. And it builds up. And they let it go, and then all of a sudden, boom, they blow up, right? And so I learned early on from one of my mentors, a guy named Bob Christensen. He taught me how to make sure that the communication was open. So one of the things I would do is I'd go to listing appointments and I'd meet with a client and I'd do my presentation, and I knew that they were interested. We talked, and now if I knew what I knew now, if I did back then when I was young, and I was a very productive real estate agent. My team, it was just, I had my own little office. We'd close 125 to 135 transactions. I was the listing broker. I had 2 buyer partners and 2 assistants. And so that's a lot of volume for the 3 of us. And people hear that and they're like, are you sure it was just you? That's it. It was just our small little group. And one of the things that Bob Christian taught me is this statement that was so powerful. In fact, today I think about it, it's one of the most powerful statements I've ever learned at a listing presentation. And the reason why it's so powerful is because not only did I learn how to make sure that we had open communication, but it actually moved the deal to a close. And it's so powerful. And in fact, to this day, it's one of the most powerful statements I ever teach anybody that I learned from Bob Christensen. And it's just powerful that I remembered it. The day I learned it, I remembered it tattooed on my brain line for line. And it's just fantastic. I'm looking in your eyes here, and Derek, and I think you want to hear the line, right?
Yeah, of course. What is it? That's what everyone's wanting to know.
Okay, so here it is. We meet and one of the things that I've learned too is you have to really establish rapport before you get into your presentation. So rapport, then you kind of present as a listing agent what you're going to do for your client. And then this is the conversation I have when there's a little bit of pause after everything's said and done and I've answered their questions and I notice there's a little pause. I said, Derek, one thing that I want to let you know is that I only make one promise when I work with people. And I want to share that with you. And the one promise that I make is that I'm going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because you need to know the truth to make good decisions, whether it's good news or bad news. Fair enough?
Fair.
Okay, and I want to ask something in return.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not. I want you to do one thing for me and one thing only in return.
What's that?
That if we work together, that if you have any concern, that you'll promise to communicate it to me thoroughly and immediately before it gets to the point of distress.
I can do that.
Then we got a deal, my man.
That's great.
You see there, and I reach out and I shake their hand, and let me tell you, they love the feeling of that. But by reaching out and shaking their hand and us finalizing the deal, they basically hired me. And I say, okay, now here's what the next steps are. Let me review the paperwork with you, and I'll answer all your questions so that we can get started. And so it's not only a great close, but it's not just for closing the deal. More importantly is that people are going to get upset through the transaction. So the example I give is that I had the seller just call my office and go off on my assistant. and he was upset because we didn't do something we said we were going to do. And so I called him, and he's a little curt with me, and I'll just use it. I'll make up a name, so I'm not using his name. So I'm like, "Hey, David, it's Art. How are you?" He goes, "I'm fine." And I'm like, "Good, man. I know you called my assistant, and you had some concerns, and you're a little upset about something." He goes, "Yeah, I'm really upset, Art. There's been A, B, and C, and they didn't get done, and I was told they were going to be done, and I'm just getting frustrated." And I said, "Fair enough. I want to hear all the details. Before we get into all the details, can I ask you a question?" He's like, "Sure." And I said, "Do you remember when we met and we decided to work together, and I told you I only make one promise, and that's always tell you the truth?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Then you made a promise back to me." And then we shook hands on it. And that promise is that you were going to call me about any concern you had before it got to the point of distress. And today you call my assistant with 3 different things, not one, but 3 different things that have gotten you pretty distressed. May I ask why you didn't communicate with me sooner when we had an agreement? And dude, I just heard a pause, and I heard this. You're right, Art. I should have. Look, man, I'm having a bad day. My wife and I got in a fight earlier this week, and then we got in a second fight. I was late to work, and I started thinking about these other things that were bothering me, and I called your assistant. I should have called you because that was the agreement, man. I apologize. We could talk about this other stuff later, man. I mean, they're actually small things, but I was just frustrated because of what's going on in my life, man, and that's why that happened.
Dude, I love that, man, because the reality is that most of the time, the thing that they say is the thing bothering them isn't really actually the thing bothering them.
Ooh, where'd you get that from?
I don't know. I've heard it somewhere.
It's a
Probably my wife.
yeah, for sure. Well, it's a deep principle. There's a guy that wrote this book. It's the best sales book I've ever read in my entire life. We're talking about Never Split the Difference. That's another great book.
Yep.
This book, it was written by an insurance salesman. I tell everybody who's in sales, you need to read this book. And the book is called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success by a guy named Bedker. Okay. He sort of pronounces it Betcher. And he sold insurance in the 20s and into the 30s and early 40s, and he wrote this book. And he traveled around with Dale Carnegie teaching. And one of the things he talks about is that what you just said. He says a man has, now we say a person, right? A person has 2 reasons for everything. The first one that sounds good, and then the real reason. And so when you're digging for concerns, I teach the agents all the time, and I teach anybody in life. This is a life lesson. He talks about it. So when somebody says, "Hey, this is what I'm upset about." So I'm upset because you said that this was going to be online yesterday and it's not on. All right, great. You're right. We said it. We didn't do it. I'll make sure it gets taken care of. Let me ask you a question, Derek. In addition to that, is there any other concern you have? And if they bring up another concern, then that's really what they're upset about, right? And it's the deeper concern. And it works in fights with your spouse. It works with people that your coworkers. And if they say, no, that's pretty much it, then you can be rest assured that you're solving the right problem for the right issue. So what happens is they tell you the one that sounds good. It doesn't mean there's not truth in it. It just means it's not the real reason, right? And so here you are solving that, and that doesn't solve the problem, right? It's like putting a bucket under a leak. You've stopped the water from getting on the floor, but now you're going to have to empty that bucket eventually. So by asking that question, in addition to that, and if they give you a second one, you're like, great, so let me understand that. Okay, in addition to that, is there any other reason besides those 2 that any other concerns you have? And you go all the way down. It never goes past 3, and it's usually just 1 and 2, right? But it's brilliant. What you said is exactly right. There's always a deeper reason.
Dude, so I have studied sales my entire life. I've been in multiple different professions, although in the mortgage business for a little over 20 years now. And I'm in love with the art of sales. I love the philosophy behind it. And I think some people that may not totally understand what sales is all about, sometimes it can have a negative connotation to it, but I just love the art of persuasion and understanding psychology. And I meet with a lot of people. I have met with thousands of people in this space over the last 20 years, and you're really, really good at it. And so, is that something you were born with?
Not at all.
You developed
Not at all.
this?
Yeah, I was at very young. I had leadership skills, right? And you know what? If you want to see the best salespeople in the world, just look at your children, right? They're not afraid of no. They'll hear no 3 or 4 times, and they'll keep asking, right? And then they'll go back and they'll think about a better way to ask it, and they'll come back to you with a different presentation. And it's that persistence, right, that makes them great salespeople. And then they know how to dig on your heart, right? They figure out the psychology behind it. And then we grow up, and then we take all the simplicity out of it. I mean, let me ask you, have you ever seen a person who's never been in sales, and all of a sudden they come, you give them a list of things to do and how to have it, and they just knock it out of the ballpark. And then you have these veteran salespeople who get caught up on all the little things, and they can't follow a dialogue. They don't know how to handle the objections that are coming out, the concerns, right? And there's a way to do it. And they get so caught up on their experience and their years, and then the person who has no knowledge and they're just following what they're told, just do it. And they do it with conviction because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
And so I'm an introvert, so even though I do public speaking, I'm an introvert. And so introverts can be extroverted, right? And there's a little bit of both in all of us, but one of them's dominant. And I think the best definition I've heard is that an introvert and an extrovert can both go to a social setting, and they both can do very well. The difference is that the introvert will talk to the same amount of people as the extrovert, especially if it's people they know, and it's somewhere where they're comfortable. The difference is the introvert needs to leave there and recharge, where the extrovert is actually, that's how they get recharged, is by all the time. Then they leave there all, that was fantastic. And as an introvert, that can happen. If I have a successful class that I do, I feel exhilarated and excited. So, but I love the study and the idea of sales too. And sales is not a bad word. I mean, I love listening to Zig Ziglar talk about when you sell something. And there's an example where somebody says, this guy pulls up this pencil and he shows a regular pencil. He goes, not one person is responsible for this pencil being made, right? Because the wood came from one part of the world. The rubber came from another part. It was put together somewhere else, and it's all these different things that happen when a sale takes place. It causes a ripple effect all the way back to production, and just something actually happens. So I had to learn to be in sales, but the thing about it is that, I'll give you an example. When I teach that 3-pillar presentation, right? A lot of times I get wow, and I hear somebody in the audience say, wow, that's cool. And I'm like, oh, did you hear what you just said? And they're like, no, what did I just say? Wow. And I tell people, I teach this at realtors, you have to have a wow, your wow, pursuit of wow dialogue, right? And they're like, what's that? And I say, I'll give you an example. Somebody says, well, I go, you just said wow. And they're like, yeah, I did. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Our only job here today is to make sure that something we showed you wowed you. So that's my first one. And I really appreciate it because we call it the pursuit of wow. How many times we want to pursue wow so hard, how many times can we get our clients, friends, family, people that we're working with to say, wow, and you just gave me my first one, and I just want to say thank you, and I hope it's not the last one. And then what happens is they start saying, when you're presenting something that's powerful, they'll say a couple more wows. And some of them will catch on and say, oh, there's another wow. I've told them. And you're like, great, I appreciate it. And so I call that the pursuit of wow dialogue, right? Notice when people are wowed and then say that to them. And then what does that do? That helps them remember that you did wow them. And people aren't easily wowed anymore. So when they go meet with somebody and they now are aware and cognizant that they said wow 3 or 4 times, what they relate that wow to being around you and to the presentation you just did.
Yeah, it's like the old saying, right? Like, people don't remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. Right, so they leave that, they're like, well, why was the presentation so amazing that Art did? And you're like, honestly, I couldn't even tell you the details, but dude, you gotta see it. It was just a wow.
Right. And they'll even use the word wow. They're like, it's wow. And he kept bringing that, and I kept saying wow the whole time. And
it's like an element of neurolinguistic printing.
It is. And, I'm an NLP practitioner. I'm not a master practitioner. And so, it's all about, how you present things. And so they do say that, right? And and they feel like they've been wowed. And that quote you said, and I say it all the time, they may have forgotten what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, good or bad, right? Good or bad. You might say, that guy's a jerk. I don't remember what happened, but we were at a bar and he said some crazy stuff to my girlfriend, thought he was being funny. What did he say? I don't remember, but I just know that he was being a jerk and I don't like that guy, right? So it cuts both ways when you're talking about that, right? And of course, the whole idea is that when we do this presentation, we want to wow them. But here's another thing that we can do. So we do this presentation, at the end we ask for ahas. Now, when I'm teaching ahas to agents, I say, let's do some ahas. We're helping each other out. I go, remember what ahas stand for? And they're like, what's it stand for? Agents helping agents. So whatever you say your ahas are, it's going to help somebody else in this audience maybe think about it differently or help them remember why this presentation was powerful. When we do it for consumers, the presentation, I ask them, we've had 6 different wows here from people I've talked to. Anybody else have any wow moments? Tell me what changed in how you see the process of owning versus renting. And people raise their hand. Well, I didn't know about principal reduction, and it's amazing appreciation, and I can't believe how much money I've been giving my landlord. They say all these things. And I said, okay, I take it, like, that's fantastic. Let me ask you guys a question as a group. Did you get value today? Show of hands, who got value today? And you've seen the presentation. Yeah. Everybody raises their hand, mostly, and they're like, we all got value. Okay, I want to do something that's important right now with all of you. Not just for me and for you, but for somebody else. So I want you guys to think about somebody right now. I want you to think about somebody who doesn't own. And I want you to think about somebody that doesn't own a house right now, somebody that you know and really care about. And think about that person. Now, my question to you is, who do you know and care about that you think would benefit from this same class as much as you did? Do you guys, everybody have a name in mind? And they all, nodding. All right, we have a little card in front of you. It had you fill out your information. On the back, just write down that person's name and their phone number and email. We're not going to bug them. We're going to allow you to participate in telling them how great it is before we communicate with them. And then we'll let them know in the next classes so that they can be empowered like you were today. Fair enough?
Yeah, fair enough. Boom. I love that. And we do the same thing anytime I do a class. We've got a little survey we ask them to fill out at the end of the class. And before they leave, we ask to collect it. It's just, hey, how would you rate it? And who else do you know? Who's another agent or another lender that you know that you think would have benefited from being here today? We'd love to invite them to the next class. I think a lot of times, I want to get into this a little bit with you, but a lot of times salespeople, they're so busy talking that they forget to listen and ask the right questions, but also they don't really have an intention or a clear path with their follow-up. So they have the meeting with the individual and then they're like, okay, thanks, let me know. Right? Yeah. And there's not really a good follow-up to it. Whereas when you're asking them to think of that person that they know, hey, do you mind sharing your information with us? We're not going to bug them, but the fortune's in the follow-up, right? And
it's a setup too, though, right? Yeah. Of course, the follow-up is really the most important part of it. The setup's equally as important because you're saying, who do you know and care about that would benefit from this class as much as you did? So now it's an act of service, right? They're doing something for the benefit of another. So look, we're going to want to invite them. So write their name down, their email. If you want to write their phone number down, that'd be great too. Just know we're not going to call anybody until we've given you an opportunity for you to let them know that we're about the class and that we're going to communicate them and with them. And they can say no if they want. However, if they say no, you got to remember they're going to be missing out on this information. So we don't want you to give the class away. So can I give you guys some advice on how to talk to somebody about this?
Now you're coaching them.
Now you're coaching them, right? And they're like, yeah. And now by you coaching them and them saying yeah to that question, they're saying, I'm going to do this. They're committing to doing it, right? You're like, okay, you want to tell them, look, I've just gone to this class. It took 30 minutes. It was we've been here longer than that, but the actual class part took 30 minutes and I was thoroughly wowed by it. You have to go to this. They're going to have another class. There's some food. How many of you feel like this is some of the best 40 minutes of real estate class you've ever been to? And they're like all raising their hand. that's what you need to tell them. This was mind blowing. I was wowed by it. If you were wowed, don't say it if you weren't, but if you're wowed by it, say I was wowed. Or if you say enough people in there were wowed, and it was interesting, and it went by quick, and it was the best. When you figure travel time and class time and a snack, it was the best hour and a half that I've ever spent to learn about real estate.
People care more about the height of your enthusiasm than they do by the depth of your knowledge.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, you can tell them all the facts you want.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing I learned. People won't drive 5 minutes to go to a meeting, but they'll drive 2 hours to meet someone.
Yes.
Right? So coaching them on how to edify,
Right.
I think is super, super important. You know, we take it for granted because we're in a business where introductions, that's the majority of most people's businesses, right? Unless you're spending a bunch of money on ads or something. But for the most part, people don't know how to refer and they're intimidated by it. But they always love the ability to make an amazing introduction. They just never want to feel like the person they're introducing is going to sell their friend,
it's not even, it's that, and it's the risk, right? When you refer somebody to another person, if that person has a bad experience,
your reputation's up.
who do they blame, right? And so that's why we underestimate how valuable a referral is, how important it is, what somebody really thinks of you. And when somebody refers someone to you, they're saying that they wholeheartedly believe in who you are, right? What was that statement you were saying right before about the meeting? You were saying that people...
people won't drive 5 minutes to go to a meeting, but they'll drive 2 hours to meet someone.
Right.
So like...
if they see value, right?
Like it's one thing for me to say, hey, you've got to come to this class that I'm doing because we're going to be talking about the difference between renting and buying, and here's all the details. Maybe some people show up to it, but it's way more impactful if I'm like, listen, man, this is by far, and I've seen a ton of classes, this is the best I've ever seen on real estate and optic into it, but there's this guy, Art, that you got to meet. He's put together this presentation. He's phenomenal. He's been in the business forever. He has a huge rental portfolio. You've got to come and meet Art. I want to introduce you to him.
Right.
That's
hear what he has to say.
Yeah, that's a whole different deal. But I'm curious, like, first of all, do you write a certain amount of classes per year?
Yeah.
And how do you, like, walk us through your sort of process, or like, do you time block space in your calendar to do deep work and thinking around content? How do you come up with the topics, and then how do you reverse engineer it to come up with the class itself?
You know, it all starts, so for instance, we just did a fix and flip class at our office, with a guy named Hussein Garcia, and he did 65 wholesale deals last year. And then he sells them to people that most of them list with him, and then he sells it. So his numbers are phenomenal, right? And I had, from 2009 to 16, my partner and I wholesaled over 600 properties. And we had 110 people in that class, and I wrote the outline for the class. And he was very nervous because he's a very smart guy, and he's astute, and he knows what he's doing. He was nervous because he's never taught a class before. So I do this really brief outline, maybe 6 or 7 things on that outline. I go, then we're just going to talk about these things. And all it was is a visual in my head of what's the beginning of when I do this. And that's how I write all my classes, is that I just visually go through chronologically the order, write them down, and then fill in the content. When it comes to writing, well, I give you.
Do you script it out as well for yourself?
No, I think when you're speaking, if you know the information, you don't need to, right? So, and that's, I'm glad you brought it up, because if you are going to script it out, or you're going to do a PowerPoint, you have to know what the slide means. And the slide will have a little bit of information, but you have to know what the whole information is, and you need to present it. And if you don't know it, it doesn't sound like you know the information, right? I mean, it happens all the time when you are presenting information and it sounds like you're reading. I'll give you an example. Let's just talk about scripts for a second. Agents have problems. Most people that don't understand what a script is have a problem with it, right? They're like, oh, it doesn't sound like me, it's fake. Doesn't sound real. I'm like, no, here's what you have to understand, is that the script, the verbiage is the right verbiage. Somebody's proven that it works over and over again. The idea that it doesn't work for you because it doesn't sound like you know why it doesn't sound like you? Because you haven't internalized it. And what I mean by internalizing it, when you memorize something, Then you can do tone and inflection. Look, I know that I do well publicly speaking. However, if you gave me something brand new that I've never seen before to present, I have to read it. People are going to know I'm reading it. And it takes a lot of practice to read something and to know when to pause and when to know to have tone and inflection, right? So I'll give you an example. So when I talk to the agent, I'm like, when you memorize anything, then you can add the tone and the inflection.
You hit the button on the table.
Oh, okay. Oh, move.
Good, yeah.
So it's about tone and inflection when you can do that. And then I take them back. I go, look, and I'll do it with you. I'll do this demonstration. So, Derek, let me ask you a question. What's your favorite movie you've ever seen? One of your favorite movies.
American Gangster.
Okay, American Gangster. Now, in that movie, think about the emotions you went through in that. Did it make you angry? Did it make you happy? Did it make you laugh? Did it make you sad? Did it make you cry? Did it make you angry? What are all those emotions? There are some of those that applied more than others, right? And guess what, my friend? Nothing in that movie was real. Nothing. Every line was scripted. Not only was every line scripted, but there was tape on the floor. Gaffer's tape is what they call it, where somebody had to walk and step, and then there was an arrow saying walk over, pointing where they're going to walk to next, to help the actors remember where to walk in, where to stop for the camera shot. All of it, every single last bit of it is scripted. The walk, everything. Nothing's real, and yet it moved you to an emotion. You want to know why? Because when those actors practice that script, they practice it hundreds of times. But you want to know what made them a professional? Is that when they said it the last time, it sounded like they were saying it for the first time ever. And that's the difference between a professional. So when you learn a script, memorize it, and then when you say it and you've memorized it, you can add tone and inflection, and it sounds like you're saying it for the first time ever.
That's it. You've got Denzel Washington that's read that script, like you said, 100 times.
100 times.
So now when they go to film it, right, now it's his own personality.
Right.
It's his own way of presenting it, but it's become second nature. I used to do magic professionally, and the difference between a great magician and one that's not so great has nothing to do with the effect. It's all in the pattern. It's all in their presentation.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because a lot of NLP, a lot of good mentalists, use NLP for their patterns.
Sure.
And the fact of the matter is, there's some fantastic tricks that can be done with cards. And when you go back and look at it, it wasn't even a trick. It was the words that was used.
Yeah.
It was just the words. That made it seem amazing.
Do you know Derek Brown?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So the guy's a master with NLP, and he's got some phenomenal.
I have a book of his, and there's another one that it's called the Wonder Words.
Wonder Words, yeah, I have that book.
Yeah, well, I have the audio version of it too, and it's amazing because these are NLP principles, right? That they're using, and also the guy that wrote Sleight of Mind. There's very close tie to the psychology, right? And so when we talk about the scripting and you talk about pattern as a magician, it's all memorized, right? It's all, and so when I tell them, they're like, well, can I change it? I said, not till you've mastered it. When you've mastered it, the way it was written, then you can change it. I'll say this. Think about all the actors that have won all these Academy Awards for their acting. Do you know how many times they have permission to change that script? Very little, if at all. That's not their job. Their job isn't to come in and change the script that was written by somebody. Their job is to bring life to the script through their presentation of it, right? So then we talk about that. And I tell them words, and that's why texting is so dangerous, right? Texting is dangerous. Now, I'm going to say a statement that's going to be controversial, but I'm going to say this before I say it. It's very powerful for you understanding why tone and inflection is so important. Because in a text, you can't create tone and inflection. Shakespeare could, to thine own self, above all, to thine own self be true, right? He could say something and he can add so much meaning to it. Well, we're not that, right? We're not Shakespeare. So I'm going to say the statement. I did it again. Sorry about it.
I feel like it's me doing it. You're good. It doesn't matter.
So I'll give you this statement. And whoever's listening to this, please don't take offense to it. And so here's the statement. And it's going to shock you. Okay? Now, just know a woman said it. Okay? A woman without her man is nothing. What does that mean to you? A woman without her man is nothing. Do you think most women would agree with that?
I think you would have a lot of people.
What would your wife say if you told her that?
A woman without her man is nothing?
A woman without her man is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing about it. This is why tone and inflection is so important. So I'm going to say the exact same sentence.
Okay.
A woman without her man is nothing. Exact same words.
Yeah.
Now, if I texted that to somebody, they're going to read it. I always say text. People read text, and the mood that they associate with that text is whatever mood they're in, right? So if somebody's defensive about, you know, men not being fair to women, and you send that text, what are they going to read? They're going to read a woman without her man is nothing. And so, you know, the way we would do that in a text is we create, you know, two commas, right? A woman, comma, without her, comma, man is nothing. Now, it's funny when I say that, most of the women in the audience agree.
Absolutely. Man, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
And by the way, like, I love the work that you're doing, and you coming up with and teaching these classes, I think is so important because, I guess, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, you know, there are a lot of people that get into our industry that have a passion for design, perhaps, or they want to make a lot of money, or they have freedom and flexibility. But I think what's not really understood oftentimes when people get into our industry is that you're really becoming a sales professional. And I think that's something to be proud of. I don't think that's anything to, but there needs to be more education around everything that you're teaching. Like, we need to get your message out to more and more people, because it would elevate the industry as a whole, right? And okay, I want to fast forward because we're running out of time. I want to talk a little bit about how you went from being in real estate. You know, you kind of joke about it, but you say you're a recovering agent. Now you're an investor, you're a developer, you're an investor. How much of your time is spent on development versus like looking for rental property? Like, what does your day look like with your business?
It really depends on where the market is. I mean, when we were building this last 8 years, we built over 110 doors. My partner, Keith Gygos, and I, Denver Development Group, we're learning. So we broke even, made a little bit of money in the middle. We did very well. And then, you know, even towards this most recent time, we've had 10 properties that we've built in North Denver, these 10 houses, about this piece of land the church wasn't using in North Denver, Sunnyside. And we built these 10 beautiful ranch homes. They were mid-century modern inspired, so they had some of the elements of mid-century modern. And the first 4 we sold, and we made $150,000 a door. We're, you know, high-fiving, all of a sudden these interest rates go up. And the next 3 we sold, we lost $125,000. And, you know, so building, everything goes in phases, right? So the rental properties I bought in 2012, I followed my own advice. I was buying when they were low, Power Plus One. And now I'm teaching classes for people who are saying, well, I wish I would have bought then. You know, I'm not going to buy now. And I'm like, well, come and look at this 6-pillar class that I do, where you keep your house and you go buy one that you really want to move into. And at today's elevated interest rate. And I'm going to present the numbers to you with you, and then you get to make a decision if it makes sense or not. The one thing is that I learned this early on, is that you can't make a good decision to say yes or no until you have all the facts, right? So then, again, that's, all these are little scripted, you know, terms. When they start out as a script, but when you've internalized them and you've used them, they become a dialogue, right? That's what I tell agents. We're going to go from scripts to dialogues. And so a lot of this internal dialogue that you hear me say, I've said hundreds and hundreds of times.
Sure.
And again, I'm trying to say it like it's the first time I've ever said it, right? That's my goal of being a professional. So as far as the building, it took a big chunk of my time. Actually, my partner managed, like, we'd find the deals and then we'd underwrite them together, meaning that we'd see where the value is and, you know, figure out what we could pay for it. Then we'd lock it up, and then he'd take over. And he'd get, run through the city and get it approved, then I take back over when it came to sales. And so the market's changed a little bit. So, we're just finishing up the products we have. Right now, my big thing that I'm doing is I've been coaching. Now, coaching isn't as lucrative as everybody thinks it is because there's a lot of coaches out there. However, the coaching has benefited me because I empower agents for finding deals and teach them about fix and flips. Inevitably, somebody's going to bring a deal to me. And I've have some great opportunity to do these wonderful fix and flips and wholesale deals that I never would have seen if I weren't coaching. And now what I'm getting into is I'm actually consolidating and selling some rental properties to pay everything else off and be free and clear. So I'm going to sell about 1/3 of my properties to pay off the other 2/3. And I'm going to be free and clear. And the coaching has led me to this platform that I've been working on, and we've unveiled it about 8 months ago. And that's going to be where I'm going to use coach. Well, actually, I'm going to become more of a trainer than a coach. I'm going to go nationwide teaching agents, training them. And then when I become their trainer and I've established trust, I'm going to show them a platform that's going to help them grow their business. So that's my new focus right now.
Dude, that's awesome, man.
I love it.
That's awesome. And guys, take it from me, like, art's the best of the best, man. And the way that your ability to communicate a message it's really phenomenal, man. And you can tell that you spent time on it, you practice. It's funny, I was listening to this podcast early this morning when I woke up. Do you know who Russell Brunson is? ClickFunnels guy?
I do not.
No? Okay, so he's now just over $1 billion in sales with ClickFunnels.
Yeah.
And this was I think he launched the company 10
Love
years
the
ago.
name ClickFunnels.
Well, the whole idea is attracting people to a landing page that keeps them engaged and eventually gets them to buy your stuff, right? Yes. But ClickFunnels gives you all the templates to do it, so you don't have to think of the copy and the flow of the website and it's everything. It's a turnkey, right? But he was on this podcast going, I realized that the cost per customer acquisition now running ads is super expensive. So now he's pivoting to do organic content, which is building a personal brand. But
that's what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. We're doing personal. Well, look, here's what it is. I'm teaching brokers that you have an audience. You see, before you had a database, right? Now you have a database and you have a second database, which is social media. And that's your audience, right? And there's a difference. So when you use your database communication, what is that?
Yeah.
Email, direct mail, texts. But the thing about because I say but too much, so I always like to replace it with the word and. And so when I look at database communication, it's like tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, Derek, it's Art. Hi, Derek, I want to ask you something. Hey, Derek, check this out. Here's social media. Social media is me walking 15 feet away from you, and you're seeing me walk, and you have a couple of choices. You can let me walk by because I don't know that you see me, or you can wave me down and say hi, Art, and I say hi and we walk away, or you can call me over and say, hey, I need to ask you something. And that's the power of social media, is that it's your audience. And when you think about your database and your audience, now these are for real estate brokers, right? If you have an audience of 2,000 people, okay, so let's just do the math on that. Now, how often does somebody buy and sell a house?
Every 3 to 7 years.
Okay, so that might be right for the first-time home buyer. They buy a home and they might buy a home 5 to 7 years later. I think the National Association of Realtors is telling us now it's closer to 10 to 12 years. Okay. And now with these interest rates being high, people are even more unlikely to sell, right? They want to maintain that low interest rate. So if we were to say every 15 years, is that super conservative?
Yeah. Super.
What if I said every 30 years?
Off the charts.
Off the charts. So I'm just going to do this math with you, just so that our agents understand it. I know we're running out of time here, so I'll just get through it real quick here. So if I took 2,000, I said, out of the 2,000 people, what's that number? Read that number.
66.67.
So if you have an audience and a database combined of 2,000 people, that means that if they didn't buy or sell a home, except for every 30 years, they would there would be 66 transactions they're closing every year. If it's 15 years, now it's 122. And you're telling me you've closed 15 transactions this year? That means that out of the 122 transactions, people chose not to work with you. Now wait, listen, don't take it personal what I'm about to say. It means, because you said something a minute ago, you said the best of the best. What I teach people is I teach this class called social proof. I'm like, when you have an audience and they believe that you're the best of the best in the business, they're going to work with you. And the only way they believe that you're the best of the best is if you show them that you're busy and other people are using you. Called social proof, right? This guy Cialdini wrote this book called The Psychology of Influence. And one of the influences that he talks about is social proof, right? We look at what other people are doing to help us make a decision that's a safe decision. Where do we do that all the time? Think about it. You want to buy a product, right? You're at a retail store. You pull out your phone, and what site do you go to see what the reviews are?
Amazon.
Amazon. You go to Amazon. You say, okay, look, this product has, great reviews. I'll buy it. Or maybe you'll buy it on Amazon. Or if you want to learn something, right? You want to learn something, you go to YouTube to learn something. We call it the University of YouTube, right? Which YouTube video do you watch where there's 10 of them about the same subject?
Whoever has the most views.
Whoever has the most views. That's social proof, right? And so we're teaching agents how to be the best of the best. You've heard this statement over and over again, that we need to be top of mind. That's all we keep hearing about. And I tell agents, look, top of mind, now with social media, there are 2 or 3 agents that are top of mind in the consumer's head. So there's a new standard that I want you guys that we're creating, and I coined this phrase, being first in mind. So top of mind, you want to be top of mind. Of the 3 agents that are top of mind, you want to be the first in mind of those 3. What does that mean? You're the first one they meet with. And they have to see you as the best of the best before you'll be the one they meet with. Because we know that 60% of consumers hire the first agent they meet with. And so it's that whole concept of being the best of the best, right? You have to be first in mind, you have to be best of the best. And it doesn't take a whole lot, 2,000 people.
That's right.
And so all these agents are buying leads and wanting this, they're calling their lenders and give me a referral. And it's like, look, you haven't even won over your own database yet. If you win them over, you'll have more than enough transactions. The fact of the matter is that they didn't hire you because they don't think you're the best of the best. There's somebody that think is better than you. Oh yeah, that hurts, right? Well, become the best at what you're doing and make sure they see that you're busy, and then you'll be the guy they call.
I think also, there's 2 ways to establish trust, right? One is transfer of trust, right? Hey, Art, you got to meet so-and-so, and we know each other, so you're likely to have sort of some built-in trust there because of our relationship.
Right.
You're transferring trust. The other way is time. So time could be accomplished in many different ways, but this is where, like, my conviction that the whole world's going to content, personal brand is going to win. It already kind of is, but like fast forward 10 years from now, and you're going to have plenty of people in our space, really any industry, where they're going to be like, man, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Like, I wish I would have put a focus into my own personal brand 10 years ago, because you're going to have key players that people gravitate to in every market, especially in real estate. But think about what happens when somebody watches a podcast. They hear Art, they're spending time with you for an hour and a half, right? All of a sudden they're like, wait, I wonder what Art has to talk about this time. By the time they've watched 6 or 7 of these, like, they're done, right? They're buying from you if you have something to sell. And the podcast is kind of the new business card, right?
Well, that's where the coaching comes in, because hopefully they're learning something, right? And if you coach enough people, then they're gonna want to reach out to you. And then for those that are in real estate sales, they have to. So the analogy is this. It's a very simple analogy. If I called you, Derek, I go, hey, Derek, I'm going to be in your neighborhood and with a friend out of town, and we're going to be over there. Can you refer me a good restaurant? And you would say what?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And you tell me the name of a restaurant. You tell me why it was good. Now, let me add something to that scenario. Let's say now a restaurant opened 6 months ago in your same neighborhood, right? And every time you drive by that restaurant, it's super busy. And on weekends, there's a line. Consistently for 6 months. What conclusion do you draw about that restaurant?
Well, that That's the place I gotta go to because it's packed.
Yeah, and why is it
Must be
packed?
good.
Must be good.
Uh-huh.
It must be good. And the food must be good, right? Well, if the food's good, that must mean that the chefs and the recipes are good, right? The food must be fresh. You know what? The servers must be good too. And if they're good servers, that means there's good management. Good management means there's good ownership. You know, it must be clean. Bathrooms are probably good. All these assumptions are made simply because you've seen other people go in there consistently and you have no idea. You've never eaten the food. So you know what you do? I call you and I'm like, hey, tell me about a restaurant I should eat. Art, this is the one my wife and I go to. Oh, by the way, there's this restaurant that just opened up and it's been open for about 6 months and it's continually busy. And I keep telling myself we're going to go there. I've never been there.
But you're going to talk about it.
Yeah, here's the name of it. If you want to try that one out too, I go, every day I go by, it's busy, and on weekends there's a line. You might want to try this one. Derek, did you just refer me to a restaurant you've never eaten at?
Yeah.
See, when you talk about personal brand, if somebody sees you as the busy restaurant in your industry, they're going to refer you that they've never even worked with you before.
Yeah.
And so and it works the other way around. So now if there's a restaurant that's been in your neighborhood for a while, now it's empty and not very busy, and every time you drive by it, it seems like there's fewer and fewer people. It looks a little, you know, the people there look a little disheveled that are running it. Maybe the windows are dirty, they don't get cleaned. You know, and you keep driving by and you know what you say? I wonder how much longer they're going to be in business. And yet, when we look at our social media presence, and we don't post enough. We all post personal stuff, which is fine, but we don't post enough about business showing other people using us. See, the busy restaurant, you referred me to it because there were other people there, and you said, in your mind, subconsciously, you said, that many people would be going there that long, that consistently, if it weren't good.
If it wasn't good. Yeah.
And then the other one, you're like, well, the manager must have changed. You know, the food can't be fresh. There's problems there. You know, do you ever say this? You know, that little restaurant going under, I think I'm going to go over there and see how bad the food really is.
Yeah, no.
No, right? And yet, as professionals, we won't show our success. Some people are like, well, I don't want to look like I'm showing off. Or some of them don't have the business. And they need to see, the consumer needs to see, if you're going to grow, that your brand is busy. Because the more people that are using you, it's like the busy restaurant, the more people are using you, then other people are looking and saying, you must be the best of the best. He's the best of the best. And that's when you get referrals.
It's also very egotistical and selfish, right? Like if you really believed you were the best and you really believed you had a message of value where you could help someone, wouldn't it be your duty and responsibility to share that with them?
Absolutely. And the thing about it is that that's the beauty about this whole concept of social proof, is that you don't have to say it about yourself. Your results, the people seeing you being busy, that's what our platform does, by the way. It pulls listings and it posts them on your behalf automatically. More importantly, though, it groups you with another group of agents in your own office, and you guys are sharing each other's listings, right? We're pulling them from new builders that are saying, yeah, post these. And so now you're posting saying, hey, here's a new development that's up. You know, I have some information on it. If you want to know more about this development and this new building's going up, let me know. And so it's about being busy, right? Think about it this way. If an agent is consistently busy while you're watching over the last year, I mean, every week they seem like they're busy, right? Why are they busy?
They're busy because they're showing you that they're busy.
Yeah, and why are people using them?
Probably because they see that they're busy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're seeing that they're busy. And when they see that people are busy, what do they think about that individual? What makes them busy?
They must be good.
It must be good. People trust them. Remember you said time?
Yeah.
So over time, if you show that you're busy, that restaurant, that's one of your factors for creating trust, right? Is over time.
Well, I think the reason a lot of people either don't do it or haven't gotten behind it or do it and then give up is because it does take time for people to trust. They've got to see it. Like, it doesn't work where you do it for 6 months and then you disappear for 3.
Do you know
got
what
to see
farmers call it?
consistency.
They call it seed time.
Seed time.
Have you heard the concept seed time? So seed time is the time it takes from planting the seed to the time that you can sow the crop, right?
Yeah.
And benefit from it. So, for instance, wheat. You can grow wheat twice a year and harvest it. Okay, from sowing to harvest is what I meant to say earlier.
Yeah.
So you can harvest it twice a year. Then you You wait, you prepare the ground for the next time, you can plant for the next year, twice a year, you can, and you get that benefit. Now, the thing about it is that social proof and creating this trust, this brand, trust through your brand takes time. It's like planting grapevines and fruit trees. They take a little longer to mature, but when they do, they bear fruit for a lifetime.
Everybody that I've talked to in the personal brand space that has any significant personal brand, most of them, what they say is, hey, like, don't look at your results for 12 to 18 months because you'll get discouraged. But if you continue to do it consistently, a couple of years in, you'll get some traction. And maybe it happens faster, right? But a couple of years in, you'll get some traction. 3 years in, you're starting to actually see results. But if you just keep going when 9 out of 10 other people won't, 5 years into this thing, you will look back and it will be the single best decision you ever made. You look back and go, thank God I built that personal brand. That's where everything's
Well,
going.
I look at the personal brand as, imagine that you've planted all these seeds. Some of them will mature in 6 months, some of them in a year, some in 2 years, some in 4 years. And imagine as far as the eye can see, you have these rows and rows of orchard that you've planted. And they're maturing right in front of your eyes, as far as your eyes can see. And now you get the benefit. You get the benefit of that whole entire orchard that you built. But you got to plant the seed, and you got to be out there communicating. And that's, when we talk about social media, that little restaurant that was going under, what if they went up on the top of their restaurant and they started putting these big posters up of them and their family? You're like, cool, they have a family. But I still don't want to go eat at that restaurant. It's too risky. I feel bad for the guy. And yet, that's what all of us professionals do. We're showing all the great things we do with our family. We're showing all the places we go. And we're proving that we're great people. However, what we don't prove is that we're good at what we do. And the only way people are going to believe you're good at what you do is if enough other people are using you to do that thing.
100%.
And that's the simple formula right there. If you follow that formula, within 3 years, you'll have that. If you had an audience of 2,000, you'd have 66 closings to 120 closings.
Yeah, fantastic, man. One last question, and I feel like I could go off on tangents with you forever. I hope you're willing to come back on the show, man. It was fun having you here. But where do you see, so 20 plus years in the business for me, I've been through a couple market cycles, and I just can't help but feel like there's just something that things are shifting a little bit. Who knows where the industry evolves to? You have the NAR settlement that just happened. Where do you believe the future of the industry is?
Well, so let me just touch on the NAR settlement. The leader, the managing broker in our office he had some training, so I got to speak to our entire office about the NAR settlement. And first of all, commissions have always been negotiable, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think NAR, this whole idea of co-op and commissions, you have to remember they're $1 billion a year, largest trade association in the United States, right? And if you just look at the dues they get, and then they own most of the MLSs around the country. So I'll give you an example. RE Colorado, right? That's for the metro area. They charge $55. They probably have 15,000 agents giving them $55 every month. And that's owned by the two local boards, Smetra and the Denver Metro Association. And so you look at that number, $55 times 15,000 agents, that's like $800,000 a month of cash coming in. So here you have this big, powerful association. You ask, why would they settle? Well, they probably know something we don't know, right? They're pretty smart over there. They have the best attorneys. They have some of the best people in the world when you're running $1 billion company annually, right, of revenue. And the great thing about a trade association is that money, all of it can be used, right? They're not building a product. They're doing, they're meeting with politicians and lobbying and doing some great things for the industry and the consumer. And so I'm not too worried that they settle. When all the dust settles, we're basically going to be in the same situation we were. which is that we'll have a co-op. There's already a solution, is that the MLS won't have the co-op commission, but each real estate office will have their own site that does have the co-op. So there'll just be a hot link. That was my idea. There'll be a hot link in there, just like there is for the public records.
Sure.
And they hit it, it shows the co-op, and they go back to the MLS. It's a simple solution, and I'm not on the $1 billion company, right? And I thought of that. So imagine the $1 billion company having people there that are very smart. They're going to figure it out.
Sure.
So where's the industry going in the long term? Look, there's no doubt about it that with technology, AI, that agents, real estate brokers that were able to close, now they'll be able to close 50 transactions a year with the same amount of time and effort it took to close 25. So there's going to be so much more efficiencies. When efficiencies happen, naturally you'll see commissions come down. Yeah, a little bit, right? But it's up to the agent to decide. But I can tell you this, that if you're operating 50% more efficient and you reduce your commission 20%, you're still making more than you were before at a higher commission.
Yeah.
I see that because of that, I see teams, small teams, and bigger teams going to be more prevalent. You're going to see fewer agents in this industry in the future. Maybe 15 years from now, there's going to be fewer than there are now, even though the population is growing. And you're going to see technology making it more efficient, which means that they can offer more to the customer and the consumer. And it's going to be harder for people to get into real estate because you're going to have to join a team because they have a foothold in certain markets. So I see a consolidation, I see efficiencies happening, and I see pricing becoming more competitive.
Brother. Dude, thank you so
Yeah,
much
my
for
pleasure.
coming on. This was a ton of fun. Remind everybody one more time where they can find you on social, or what's the best way to find you?
I have a lot of TikTok videos that I do, so they can find me as the Prophet of Properties.
Prophet of
Prophet of Properties.
Okay.
Now, it's Prophet like Prophet, but on TikTok I made a mistake and I put Prophet like Profit. So it's the Prophet
Same
of
guy.
Properties, same guy.
Uh-huh.
And they can get all my content there, and then I'm doing more. So
Are you coaching right now?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, guys, go find them. There's plenty more where this came from.
Yes.
We'll have you back, man. And thanks again for coming on the show. This was fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, buddy.
Every time that I see a limit, what? I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck, nah, I had to plan it. The way I work is out of this earth. I can feel the momentum. Need it all, no fractions, dream it, then I got